A journalist, Agba Jalingo, who has been in police detention for over a week over a report about an alleged diversion of 500 million naira by the Cross River State governor, has been charged with treason. My question is, why? Why do governments say Nigeria is a democracy when the fourth estate are punished for reporting their misgivings? Well, I would not want to be a judge and jury on my own issues, so I have still in the studio Jide Ologun, political analyst and a member of the legal framework of this country. He's a lawyer. Of course, we have Francis Chilaka, political analyst. Thank you, Francis, and Jide for joining us. So I'll start with you, Jide. Where does the right of a member of the fourth estate of the realm, who's a journalist, stop? And where does the rights of a governor, a member of the executive, begin?
I've done a study of this particular case. Absolutely, we have freedom of expression. But if you isolate the allegations prompted by the law enforcement agencies, it borders on treason, which is like instigating the removal of the governor by a means except through constitutional means, and the Constitution covers that. And again, he's been linked up with the revolution now that was prompted by Showore, you see, and we have said it in Nigeria. In the criminal law value chain, there is need for thorough investigation, diligent prosecution, and a committed judiciary. So as we speak now, he's not convicted of any treason. And we expect that the law enforcement agents would have done a thorough investigation. And of course, just like the DSS also, after arresting Showore, went to the court to seek for an order to keep him for 45 days and kept on changing the allegations against him. So we watch as this proceeds. But again,
do we have to watch? Because the thing is, if the law is very clear about how long you have to hold a person for, especially if you have no charges against them, why does the government, especially the executive, whether at the state level or the federal level, find it very convenient to overlook that and try to trump up charges?
These are the several questions some of us have been asking. And it has to do with...
But you are a lawyer, you're part of the NBA.
I'm coming to that.
If we are asking these questions, we should be asking them.
You know one thing that is basic? Some of us spoke out when we declared in this country, by virtue of mandated leadership, that the rule of law can be subjective. And some of us said no. The rule of law is the foundation of justice. All right? So when you begin to see cases like this, it is like trying to counterbalance the separations of power between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative power. And I said there is a synergy. We continue to have scenarios like this. But having said that, as far as I am concerned, these are allegations that must be established. I also went into the matter, and it has to do with the floating of a microfinance bank, which the governor claimed was the fulfillment of his promise to bring empowerment near the vulnerable so that he can support and again, to embrace the workers in the garment factories and things like that. So I think this is a matter that must be thoroughly investigated. But what we are saying is that you have your fundamental human rights under the law. But again, having said that, the law enforcement agents are the ones to investigate. In the case of Showore, we cannot claim that he has mobilized any revolution, because revolution now means that there is need for good governance in Nigeria. And while I was responding to that, I brought it to the case of Nigeria. The Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate got managed by the colonial master from the 1900s, and towards 1960, there was a revolutionary movement that gave birth to our political independence in 1960. But when the government begins to interpret actions, they are the ones that manage the law enforcement and everything. And like I said, many have been complaining. But let's see how the law enforcement agents will be able to manage this effectively, because you saw the case of the former aide of Goodluck Jonathan, who was being prosecuted. And the judge came to the conclusion that the EFCC failed to prove that case beyond all reasonable doubts. And he's been acquitted of all charges. So we need to get serious and not just, and I don't want to join myself to the team of convicting people on the basis of assumption, but we are calling for thorough investigation and let the due process of the law be followed.
Talking about due process of the law here, in the case of former President Jonathan's aide, I'm sure he had great lawyers. He was a former presidential aide, so there's some weight to get the best of lawyers to prove his case. For us journalists in Nigeria, and I do not really want to put myself in that situation, but I have to because I'm a journalist, you don't have insurance that covers whatever risk that is involved if you are carrying out investigative journalism. And we have the likes of Delegiwa to point to. So in his case, do we really, or are we hopeful that the rule of law will come to play here, being that it's an ordinary paper journalist, newspaper journalist? And I'm not in any way trying to say that the law doesn't work, but being a citizen of this country and seeing how our judiciary system works and how the three arms of government work in this country, is there hope for that case?
Well, we need to understand that the judiciary is compromised.
Mr. Logo might not agree to that.
That's my own personal opinion. The judiciary is compromised, and we seem to have two laws. I keep saying it, two laws in Nigeria, one for the rich and one for the poor. It depends on how much money you have. You and I know what it takes to get the services of a son. So let us start from there. But you see, the thing is this. The way some of our government officials go about issues gives the impression that they don't even care about the people. They forget that power belongs to the people. It does not belong to who is in government. The people have elected you out of 200 million. Say, represent us. But the unfortunate thing is that when Nigerians get elected, they become demigods. Because the journalist simply said, this money has been misappropriated. And they started hounding the guy all over the place. And nobody has come out to say this money this money has not been misappropriated. In other words, what the Cross River State government is trying to do is to say nobody should talk. No matter what I do as a governor, you have no right to say anything. But it is wrong. And I would say this, that I expect that, it's unfortunate and sad that Nigeria will no longer have union. Ordinarily, I would have expected that the whole media would down their tools in protest. Because if one person goes down today, several others will go down tomorrow.
Let's quickly point to that. I used to be part of that media in that state, and the biggest media in Cross River State is the state media, which works for the civil service, which somewhat is under the governor's purview. So where are they downing tools to? Do they have the right to do that? Because, they might be threatened that if they don't show up for work, they might lose their job. So we find ourselves in a situation, and again, we need to also probe the story of that young man, because a journalist has facts, has sources to prove whatever he is writing or talking about.
Which is true.
So if the government of Cross River State is against what the young man printed, they should counter facts. Bring your facts to counter what this young man is saying instead of throwing him behind bars.
Well, you see, where I'm really upset with the way we're going right now when it comes to people being arrested and charges trumped up against them is the fact that it appears that the government is using revolution now as a tool to cage everybody.
And when you say everybody, you're talking about the media, you're talking about everybody else, every critique of the government? Because tell me, if he's being charged right now for treason, in quotes, and now somebody else comes up tomorrow to say, I don't agree, you get arrested.
And the next thing is that you are linked to Showore. But we need to understand, I keep saying I don't understand the Nigerian system anymore. It looks as if we don't have a system. It looks as if the Nigerian constitution looks like a document that has been suspended and only used when it suits government. And that's why I say that the judiciary has been compromised. A lot. They know that. If you look at the case of the judgment against Nigeria, I think it's 9-point-something billion or so, you know that. I mean, from what is coming out now, it shows that there is a lot that has gone wrong in the judiciary system. We keep talking of governors. It is time we begin to look at civil servants. They are also part of the problem.
Oh, that's going to take maybe a whole decade.
Yeah, because the rot we have in Nigeria is not only those we elect. The civil servants, don't forget, they are the ones who wait to receive you. They are the ones who prepare the table.
But does that not also amount to the fact that we probably are the ones who fuel the corruption that we're screaming foul about?
I believe that if you permit me to go out of the Nigerian space and give us some brilliant examples, you see, investigation
Nigeria's
is still critical.
Is nascent. You cannot be comparing us
We
to
must, because we are in a global community. We have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I was going to make reference to the FBI report that came out recently. You can see the brilliance of investigation that started as far back as 2016. And people hardly read about it on the pages of newspapers.
Until they got the facts.
The completion, and you could see the thoroughness. So if we have law enforcement agents who should investigate, I just mentioned the case of Showore. What can we lay against Showore?
But how do you get law enforcement? I'm sorry, Mr. Logan. How do you get law enforcement to be this thorough?
We need a committed system.
If they are somewhat an appendage to the executive that you're asking them to investigate.
You know what? You mentioned something which is very brilliant. The Constitution says in Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution as amended that sovereignty belongs to the people, from whom the government derives authority. Mm-hmm. But the people who should exercise the sovereignty are divided too over issues.
It's not divided. I beg to disagree with you right now.
In what
it has not been divided. It is just that the people themselves are not informed. How many Nigerians know the Constitution? Oh. How many Nigerians? Why is it that the Nigerian Constitution is not being taught in schools? Why is it that the churches do not even take time every Sunday to look at the Constitution? How many Nigerians know the Constitution? When you lawyers come and say the Nigerians are not living up to expectation, I laugh because the Constitution is only known to you. Lawyers.
It should not be.
Mr. Logan, these countries that you're trying to compare Nigeria to, let's take the U.S. because we always use the U.S. You hear the average American say, I know my rights, and that's because they are aware. There is education out there. But in Nigeria, it seems
How did they get away?
Is there not a system that is organized that works? Does our system work that way?
I have been an advocate, and you are a witness to that, of rolling out some salient provisions of our Constitution. In particular, sir, Section 16, subsection 2. If you go to the D part, you will not be the friend of this government. Because it says that this government must provide adequate and affordable house, adequate and affordable food, adequate and affordable.
Well, we have food security in Nigeria, according to the president.
Minimum reasonable living wage, care for the old, for the disabled, for the for pensions to all citizens. And like I advise people, the Constitution of this country is not a document for lawyers. It just happens to be a document that lawyers need to carry out their functions. So we need to go and engage ourselves on this basis.
What is the NBA doing?
That is why we have the National Orientation Agency. We have all these agencies, and at the individual level, why are we here today? Because we are showing concern, and we learn deeply.
Let me just cut in here. We're on different fora. We've spoken so much about National Orientation Agency. It's one agency that does not exist.
Oh, it does exist.
Because I'll tell you why.
But does it work?
When the legislatures passes laws and the president assents to it, They are supposed to take it and bring it down to the people. How many times, Paris, as you sit here, how many times have you seen the Nigerian Orientation Agency? How many times have you seen
National Orientation
Agency? How many times have you seen their staffs educating people? Even voters' education. Why must we wait for a month, 2 months to the election? We now start talking about educating people about their rights to get a voter's card, their rights to exercise their rights. So I think the whole thing is that those we have, like I keep saying, those we have elected are enjoying the fact that people are living in ignorance.
But again,
and they're taking advantage of it.
But my position is that living in ignorance.
Every MDA has a mandate. The NOA has a job to do. Do they have to wait for the government to tell them what to do? They get paid salaries. So we can't even make an excuse and say, oh, it's the government that is... The NOA has a job to do, but that job is not being done. Should we be blaming the government again on this one?
You see, personally speaking, ignorance is a choice. Just this morning, I was on a media outing, and I made a point clear. How many of us know the mandate of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources? I dug into it. I have been throwing it into the space. The oil and gas resources of this country should be managed in a way that it benefits all Nigerians and creates sustainable development. Do we have that when we spend 11 trillion naira in 6 years on subsidy? That is the issue we are raising. We are expressing concern.
We need to wrap up this conversation, because if we go into this, we're not leaving here anytime soon.
I love it when lawyers sit down to tell the people that they are not aware. They are not being fair. They are not being truthful. They are not being sincere to Nigerians. You and I know, in terms of education, how many Nigerian children are educated?
Well, we have 18
plus
million out of school children.
So we need to take our constitution to the classrooms and start to teach it.
Who are those who are fighting history, fighting education? That is why I said earlier, maybe when we get to the point where we mobilize as Nigerians and call for accountability and good governance, we may achieve these results.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I'll be behind you to
Thank you very much, Francis Chilaka. We have to go. These gentlemen, it's been an interesting conversation. But in view of the xenophobic attacks, Plus package for today will be showcasing some social media responses by Nigerians and South Africans to the rising rate of killings of Nigerians in South Africa. Stay with us. It's time for my take. So, we're looking at the issue of Leah Sharibu, whether she's dead or alive. The government says she's alive. The woman who's in custody of ISWAP is saying she's dead. Who do we believe? We can't even trust our governments anymore. We can't even tell if they're telling us the truth. Or they're just keeping the truth from us in order to look good in front of us. But time will tell, wouldn't it? Moving on to the journalist who's been locked up by the Cross River State governor, or the government, saying that whatever he published is tantamount to felony. So all of a sudden, everybody's being tied to Showore and the revolution. What if there was no Showore and no revolution now? What would the government be tying every supposed truth that a journalist is digging up, or misgivings? What would they be tying it to? This is a democracy. And if we must practice democracy, let's do it to the later. Practice it to the later. Allow the press freedom. If you do not agree with the facts, challenge them. Take them to court. But locking up a journalist and not giving him a right to go home after 48 hours the most, is that not also somewhat trampling on the fundamental human rights of that journalist? I question a lot of things about the way our governments today are acting. They obey the law when it suits them, and of course they trample on that same law when it doesn't suit them. So the question is, as Nigerians, how long can we take this for? Think about it tonight when you go to bed. I am Maryann, and it's been Plus Politics.